Well, first up, let's welcome Baroness Helena Kennedy, who's a Labour peer and barrister. She's also a former principal of Mansfield College, Oxford, and she joins us now. Good morning to you, Baroness.
Hello, Julia.
Hello. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. I would like to ask you about the crime issues as well as someone with legal expertise. But let's talk first of all about this issue of vaccine passports. Now, they were mooted first for nightclubs at the end of September, despite the fact that young people can go to nightclubs. Indeed, old people like myself could go to nightclubs when I'm allowed out of my home without showing proof of a vaccine. But then there was talk about pubs and restaurants, and then it was football matches, Premier League, and then it's concerts, cinemas, theatres, even going to to church, synagogue, mosque or temple. And now we're told, and it wasn't denied by an education minister yesterday, that they're looking at having to show proof of 2 jabs to go to a lecture, to go into your halls of residence. As a human rights barrister and as a former principal of a college and university, is that acceptable to you?
Well, listen, in general, I'm not enthusiastic about identification cards or any of those things. One of the great things in Britain that we feel very proud of is that we've never had the situation where a policeman can say, show us your papers. It was something that happened in other countries where they were much more authoritarian. And that idea of liberty is important to us. But we're in a crisis and we have to decide about this. And I've watched, I'm not at Oxford anymore, but I am the Chancellor of Sheffield Hallam University up in the north of England. And last year it took a terrible toll on students because they couldn't get to lectures. They had to do everything from home. And many students are actually not living in circumstances where they can do that very easily. They're in shared accommodation. They are in very tight places where actually the idea of being able to set up the circumstances for following things online is not easy at all. And sometimes the Wi-Fi at home is not great. And so having lectures is part of the whole university experience. And it's been a very tough decision, but we've been talking about it. And I actually have come to the conclusion that you really do have to do something. If we want people to have a university education, we want them to come out having had the real benefit of it, especially when we charge them so much money.
Yeah.
I think that you have to do something. And I would prefer to call it a pass rather than...
Well, I mean, you can call it whatever you want, but it's still someone showing proof of their medical records to do it. I'm amazed, again, that so many people who consider themselves to be liberal and are concerned about these issues such go, yeah, but in this emergency... This is not an emergency for young people. This disease very largely isn't killing young people, certainly not young, healthy people. There was a crisis at universities because of pandemic policy, not because of COVID. A whole bunch of 18 to 25-year-olds getting COVID is not actually an issue for the 18 to 25-year-olds. The people who they might then go on to infect, that may be an issue, but those people older are double jabbed, or if they're vulnerable, they will be double jabbed by now. Or if they've chosen not to be, well, I'm sorry, that's their lookout. I find it extraordinary that a disease that is actually not a risk to young people should be, when the rest of the vulnerable population are double jabbed, should be a reason to end a liberal democracy's idea that you shouldn't be asking for people's personal health records where it's irrelevant.
It's something you can only do in if you really weigh up evidence and you really are persuaded by it. And you're absolutely right that young people are not at risk of dying of COVID in the way that older people are. But what they are at risk of is long COVID. And what they are at but no, hold on, don't be so dismissive. What you are at risk of is that when large numbers of people are coming together, you're likely to see the development of new variants and variants that will be resistant to the vaccines that we've spent so much money and so much time on developing and getting through our population. And so that's one of the serious risks. And if you speak to any epidemiologist, they'll tell you that the next risk for us isn't that the young will die, is that the young will get a form of COVID that will be damaging to their lungs.
Well, look, there is a risk of long COVID. There is quite a lot of evidence emerging that actually, again, it's only people who've been seriously ill who are the most affected by long COVID. Long COVID symptoms include what I have, which is some of my taste buds still haven't come back after 16 months. I'm sorry, but I can live with that. I know some people do have some serious issues. I accept that. However, there are lots of people who have lots of serious issues after getting disease, lots of people who have ongoing issues after being in ICU for many, many years. We don't either shut down society or demand everyone else shows a vaccine passport in order to do that. That is a sledgehammer to crack a nut. Do you not think some of the basic principles, I mean, and the fact that, as you know, the take up of the vaccine varies hugely depending on the background of the person who's involved. So we know there's much lower take up among some religious groups. There are much lower take up among some ethnic minority groups. And you'll actually be saying, oh, if you're white, CUV or atheist, or you're middle class, off you go to university in your hall of residence and you lecture. But odds are, if you're black and working class or some other religious groups, sorry, you're not going to be allowed in. That is a very dangerous step to go towards.
Julia, that's not. I mean, of course, if there are people who say for whatever special reasons they can't do it, then they would take daily tests. They would just have to arrive at the lecture hall and be able to show that they'd had a test that morning and that they're clear. And so there are other ways that you can deal with that very small minority. But you see, you have to protect the people who have good reasons for not being vaccinated at all. And it makes a big difference if the majority of people have been tested, because it gets them into lecture halls. And let me tell you, I don't suppose you've been in a hall of residence for a long time, but my grandson is no, it's just that all of us in that situation.
We're old.
You look at modern halls of residence, usually on a floor, there's a tiny little kitchen, and everybody on that floor shares that tiny bit of kitchen, and they all go down there to do their bit of cooking. And it's tight as hell. And so the idea that somehow people can protect themselves and socially distance anybody who's got anxieties, and there will be amongst those students people who've got anxieties.
So, once again, society completely controlled by the people who are anxious. That's not how we used to do things in this country. Reassure the anxious. Maybe those who can't be double jabbed. Unfortunately, that tiny minority should be the people who unfortunately have protection. Maybe those people, we make sure that they have a different accommodation. There are ways of dealing with this that don't involve the sledgehammer of a threat that if you are not coerced into having a vaccine, which you may or may not want. Now, I would have the vaccine. I'm double jabbed myself. I'm not an anti-vaxxer, but I defend the right of people not to have the vaccine if they choose not to, for whatever reason.
Yes. No. Well, I've departed from that position. I don't think you can do that in the circumstances that we're in, because I think too many people are going to suffer. And it's that thing that you do it, not necessarily even for yourself, but you're doing it to protect other people. And that's where you and I would part company, because I do believe that there is something about society that matters, which is that you do something not because of your own interest, and you press down your own position on something in order to help.
That's among the reasons why my daughter was MMR'd when she was a baby, but I still wouldn't make it compulsory.
Well, we've tried the business of just persuading people, and it's the young who are resistant.
They're not resistant. It's almost 6%. We don't even have, in most countries, they would dream of an overall population having just under 60% take up of this vaccine. As it is, we've had over 90% in most groups. They haven't got round to it. Most of them haven't got round to it yet.
Well, this is a way of getting them round to it.
You make it more easy for them to get the vaccine. You don't coerce them and threaten them. Helena, do you still think you're a liberal?
There's no threat.
Do you still think you're? Yes, it is. You can't go to university if you. Do you still think you're a liberal?
You're coming into education to get an education. You want to share it with all the other people, and we're not finding that that's proving a problem. That online there's a whole lot of nonsense. These conspiracy theories, and so many of the
people. But can you answer my question? Do you still think you're a liberal?
Oh, I am a liberal. And I'm
You're
more
a liberal is
than
in favour of vaccine passports for young people to get an education.
I believe in protecting minorities, and that's really important. And
it'll be ethnic minorities who won't be able to go to university because they're a higher rate of not being jabbed.
I don't think that's true. I don't think that's.
It is true. The take up in Afro-Caribbean communities is under 60% in some cities.
I was speaking to a young black man the other day who said, my reason for not wanting to take the jab is it's my little form of rebellion. And he said, but I might have to change my mind if it's about travel. And so people sometimes need a little bit of coercion.
But you're still a Liberal. Just finally, I want to ask you about the Boris Johnson's announcement, his crackdown on crime, beating crime plan. Burglars freed from prison after serving a year will wear tags 24/7. That's currently not the case. And an end to restrictions on stop and search. And offenders, we're told by Priti Patel, forced to pick up litter and clean graffiti in unpaid community service that's very visible to the community. Do you support those measures, and will they beat crime?
No, I don't support those measures. And I'd ask you a question. Do you think Boris Johnson's a Liberal?
Not anymore, no.
I'm afraid that law and order is always the big test of whether people are Liberals or not. I actually think that simply jailing people and tagging people and that's a very considerable inhibition on people's freedom and liberty. I think that there are better ways of dealing with crime. And at the moment, what we're going to do is ratchet up the age-old way, which is to punish people.
Whatever you do, don't jail people who commit crime, but imprison people in their homes who haven't even got COVID. It's a strange world these days. Dame Helena Kennedy, Baroness Helena Kennedy, thank you so much for joining us.